So in chapters 1 through 8, we just see more and more evidence that Jesus is who he says he is, that he's God come in the flesh. And what we're going to see a shift in chapter 9 to show us why he came. But we're really right at the end of that first half, looking at evidence of who Jesus is. And so let's begin in Mark chapter 8 and verse 1. In those days, the multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said to them, I have compassion upon the multitudes, because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their own houses, they will faint on the way. For some of them have come from afar. And then his disciples answered him, How can one satisfy these people with bread here in the wilderness? And he asked them, How many loaves do you have? And they said, 7. And so he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And they set them before the multitude. And they also had a few small fish. And having blessed them, he said to set them also before them. And so they ate and were filled. And they took up 7 large baskets of leftover fragments. And now those who had eaten were about 4,000. And he sent them away. Immediately got into the boat with his disciples and came to the region of Dalmatia. Jesus has this huge multitude of people, 4,000 people. They've been with him for 3 days. But they don't have any food and they're hungry. And Jesus says he'd send them home to go get something to eat, but they'd probably faint on the way because they come a long ways just to get to him. And so Jesus tells his apostles he has compassion upon them. He wants to do something for them. And the apostles basically ask, well, what do you want us to do? You know, there's no food out here in the wilderness. That sound familiar? Makes you wonder why the apostles hadn't caught on yet. But they're just as slow as we are at catching on sometimes. And so how many loaves did they have? They had 7 loaves and a few fish. Jesus takes it, breaks it, blesses it, and he passes out to the multitude, and they all ate and they were filled. And there were 7 large baskets of leftovers. You might be thinking, well, wait a minute. Didn't Mark just tell us a story about Jesus feeding thousands of people with bread and fish? Did he duplicate it? Well, there are some that make that argument, but that doesn't make sense contextually. There are also some people that say, well, the feeding of the 5,000 was to the Jews, and the feeding of the 4,000 was the Gentiles. I don't know if that makes sense contextually either, but it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're Jew or Gentile. The lesson in this story is still the same. Jesus is saying, I'm the one that will satisfy you. I'm the one that will fill you up. You want to be fulfilled, then you got to eat me. You know, Jesus says, I made you, I know you, and I know what will fill you up. I am what will fill you up. In fact, that's basically what he says over in John chapter 6, verses 27 to 35. You know, they had missed the whole point of the miracle in the first place. He says, you're seeking after me for the physical food, for the food that perishes. You know, they're trying to be satisfied with something that won't satisfy them. Don't you know you're just going to have to eat again? And Jesus says, I am the living bread. You've got to eat me up. And until you do that, you're never going to be satisfied. You know, we have a tendency of seeking after things to satisfy us that were never meant to satisfy us. So what are you eating? You know, we see it all over our society. We see it with drugs and alcohol, with sex and pornography. People just trying to be satisfied by that, but they only have to have more and more and more. But it doesn't just have to be those things you get addicted to. It can also be anything that you try to be fulfilled with in this life. It's never going to fill you up because they were never meant to do that. You could be our family. It could be our career. It could be politics. It could be anything. But until we see that's Jesus and until we fill ourselves up with him, we're never going to be truly satisfied. We're going to be eating junk food and trying to get it to do what it was never meant to do. And so those are just a few thoughts for you to kind of take with you today.